So what happens? Right, it says it's broadcasting. So if I go across now, I can hear the echo. Can you down a little bit?
Can you hear the echo? Hang on a minute.
I'm going to turn mine down as well. I'm going to look very professional.
Can you hear me now? Is there an echo now?
Hold on a second. I don't know where this is coming off.
Oh, hang on a minute. I've got to change that on the mic. Stand by.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do
audio. There will be an echo. Right, speaker. Right, speaker. I'm just going to change that to headphones.
Right. This is brilliant.
Okay. Echo should have gone.
Right, this is us setting up now, isn't it? We look awesome. Say something?
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
You're good.
Hello.
You're good. Okay, let me just what I'll do should be coming up. I'm just checking that we're going live.
Sure.
Got one thumb. So literally I'm watching their own live stream. Isn't that weird? I'm watching our live stream even though I'm on it. I don't know how these things work now. It's too much.
Just gone into yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Okay, we're going out. Hey fam. Right, okay, cool. So people can drop things in the chat here, Harry, and we can see what people are saying. Let me just shut that. Cool. There we go. So I'm getting an echo from my own channel. Right then. Well, welcome to Fast Performance. I don't know whether you know much about it at all, but I can explain to you. The reason I dragged you on here, Harry, is because you are a police officer. Well, you were a police officer, obviously, Devon and Cornwall Police, but you are armed response as well, and you have about 40,000 Twitter followers, and you sometimes cause Twitter storms, which is quite amusing. You're not immune to it, you know. You're not immune. Yeah, I know. And I did listen on Chris Dangerfield's podcast that you did recently. I think today, in fact. And I remember I was nodding away to a lot of what you were saying, and I think we were very much aligned on what's going on in the world at the moment. And I thought I'd drag you on here and talk about it because I think it's a great subject matter.
Good.
So, how are you?
We're actually able to talk about it a little bit more nowadays as well.
Isn't it? Well, someone will find something. Something you did say actually to Chris was quite interesting. You said you can say anything like the weather's great today, and someone on Twitter will attack you for it. Well, it's not nice for some people. You know what I mean? It's amazing. Yeah.
They will find there'll be somebody. Well, I mean, if you've got 30,000 either neutral or positive people who have seen a little video, 2 people complained. And so I had to tell my force once is let me deal with the 2. You know, let's be happy about the 38, the 28,998.
Because I started doing it back in 2011. I wasn't massively into Twitter because it's quite a good way of exposing yourself to the world, isn't it? And the world's anonymous on Twitter, isn't it? A bit like YouTube. But I think luckily on YouTube here, the group, and you can see some now in the list here. There's some names I recognise. Hey Paul, how you doing? They're a good bunch. It just seems somehow on YouTube I've got a good bunch of followers, which is great. It's a very pleasant place to be.
Well, I'm glad I sort of introduced to you by Mr. Green. What's his name? Oh, it's terrible. Honestly, I'm terrible for names.
Andrew Ward, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrew Ward. Yeah, what a top guy. So I watched some of your stuff, and again, I love that. Just forthright, no nonsense. And this is why I do get myself into a little bit of trouble now and then. And then I saw you fly that aircraft around the desert in that game thing. You hadn't flown one before like it, did you? And you were commenting on it. And it just shows, because I'm comparing it, knowing how not a chance in hell that I could have done your job, because you are doing several thousand things at once, checking your fuel, doing this, finding finding your tactic you're going to use, looking out for the person and not getting shot, and doing brilliantly. With a lot of the time, if I was driving a car at 140 mile an hour, it is a lot less to deal with. I'm not having to worry about my fuel every 5 minutes or someone shooting me. I can worry about that later. So it was quite impressive to watch, and I watched the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Good skills.
Seriously, I don't know about you, but when I make those films, I watch them back a lot before I put them out, because of course I'm very worried about being picked up for some inaccuracy, and we shouldn't be worried about these things, because it's about authenticity, isn't it? And in your job, you didn't get a second chance. If you were to put a bullet in someone, that's you in court, isn't it? For a very lengthy time, the rest of your life, because some people don't realize this, but because my father was armed response, of course, for many years.
I was hearing.
We'll talk about that. Now he had some situations like you, where the finger was squeezing the trigger, and he came home that night and unfortunately drank himself to death over many years, which is going to be very, very common with many officers, I think, in the future. But he was saying, "Look, I'm just a civilian that holds a warrant badge," And if I do engage in violence with someone, I go to court like everyone else. I mean, it's no difference. Could you kind of elaborate a little bit on that for the audience? Because I don't know whether they know.
Yeah, but basically, there's a saying that is that I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah.
And in the armed response unit, it's very much sort of, I go on statistics basically, is not many coppers have had to do life. And I've got enough faith in the judicial system to know that if I haven't done something negligent or dishonest, then I'm probably not going to go to prison. What I will have is probably 6 or 7 years of utter hell, having my name dragged through the system, not being able to give any defense to me whatsoever. And saying, and the officers I speak who have been in these positions say it's that drip feed, constant drip feed. And people suffer from PTSD, not from the incident, but from the events afterwards. And even though it's unlikely they know they'll go to jail, they could still go to jail. You know, and a copper in jail is probably not a good thing.
That would be...
It's immensely stressful. But I go on the statistics. What's the chance? Pretty low. So I'm just going to do what's right. And I have to satisfy the guy standing in my 2 boots. And that's me. And that's got me through, luckily.
I was surprised you stayed firearms for so long, because my father, he I don't know the years, Harry, but I remember when Hampshire Constabulary started taking on firearms. I believe he had an MP5 because he used to bring them back in the back of the cars. Remember the old Grenadiers? Yeah. So what was your what were you carrying then in Devon and Cornwall?
MP5s. Yep. We had mini Rugers which had a wooden stock, but they were great for a long distance. They were a very small round, but MP5s were good, but they're not brilliant over a long distance. Incredibly accurate. It was a point and squeeze thing. And then we were collecting quite a few weapons, and they decided we needed to have a compromise between MP5, Mini Ruger. So we had the G36. Heckler got G36. And that was a good compromise for distance containment. And then we used obviously the Glock, and we had the AP baton rounds and taser and things. And then we have shotguns, but that's animal distraction. And then we got the rifle officers who got the bigger stuff, really. So yeah, that's what we had. We had no missiles, unfortunately, to our stock, but probably just as well.
MP5. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, the MP5 was still using to the end because I did the VIP protection. And we usually have one of those hanging around somewhere, especially if it's in very public area. And, you know, it's things like, you know, if it's always better to be prepared sort of thing. But otherwise, yeah, love the weapon, but wasn't quite punchy enough, I think.
But then again, you can't have a high velocity round necessarily. It was a 5.56 in the G36, wasn't it?
That's right. 5.56.
You're going to get high velocity round. But if you're shooting people in a supermarket, which of course is the most crowded environment, then a 9mm round will kind of stay in the body, won't it, as opposed to a 5.56 that may go through.
Yeah, well, consider as well our rounds were against the Geneva Convention because they're like the dum-dum bullets, so they fragment because it's quite embarrassing and lots of paperwork if it ends up going through the baddie and then entering someone completely innocent. So it needed to stop, and the fatalities that my force were involved in over the time that I was in there, it was really like 7 or 8 in the end. And I remember one officer saying he was absolutely fighting this guy to get him cuffed after he'd been shot.
Really?
And the surgeon was given commendation, not commendation, he was commended by the judge because the coroner, because he obviously died later, unfortunately, but the coroner's officers said the pathologists, because it'd be forensic post-mortem, said the skills involved in actually nipping off all the bleeds within the body was incredible. And of course, he was from Iraq. You know, that's
was he? Yeah, he spent time out in theatre. Yeah.
Well, that's so. Yeah, and that's
why they sent him out there, wasn't it? Really, that's because you get the
and it's where with the ARVs. I mean, we were cannulating at one point on the armed response unit because we're dual rolled, so we'd be attending fatal and serious road traffic collisions.
Right.
And we had the vehicles in Devon and Cornwall. We had less sort of gun crime, but we had plenty of knife crime, plenty of drugs down there. And so we were dual rolled with traffic because it was the obvious choice. We had the big cars to get through lots of green bits to get to the grey bits to the cities and things. And so then I was a sort of senior investigating officer of fatal road traffic collisions along with my other stuff.
Okay.
And that got me the interest really I was getting a little nervous at the end, thinking, I wonder if our cheeky little one will bite me one day. And I managed to avoid getting dragged down by it. But yeah, I must have seen a lot of dead people. But to me, afterwards, it tends to be that I'm not religious at all, but the soul had gone, and that was my coping mechanism then.
Yeah, my father used alcohol instead, but he was a Royal Marine. I mean, this is very common. He was a Royal Marine first. He'd always be in the police clubs up top, So,
Did you mind me asking? Was your dad quite I'm quite a chatter, as you can see already, and I don't necessarily talk about the job, but I am finding, even though I did armed response and I did all the fatalities, I can shed a tear at a stupid advert, and you think, well, how can someone be like that? But I release that emotion, not blubs. I'm not talking blubs or anything, but I'm not sort of hardened to it that it doesn't affect me, this, that, and the other, which I suspect myself could be the cheeky one that says, right, you've had your wine glasses full now, it's now pouring.
Yeah.
What sort of character was he?
No, he was a quiet man. He was very respected in the police force. In fact, when we buried him, I was in Afghanistan in 2011, and I got a call. I got crash moved out of Afghan, which means it doesn't happen to many people. The Joint Compassionate Cell, literally, I got an email from my wife, and she said they're coming for you. Is what she said. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What are they coming for you? I didn't even realize he was ill. You see, he'd been on and off ill. But then, literally, all these massive wagons rolled up outside. I was in an HQ building, and very young men and women in body armor, and they came into the office and took my weapons off me because we were armed the whole time because people get getting killed. I had a 6-hour P226 on me. They took that off me. They took the SC80 off me as well because you can't travel weapons when you're going home. And I was literally in fatigues, crash moved 16 hours. I was by his bedside. Managed to get to talk to him for about 3 days. He went unconscious and then died a couple of days later. So by the time I got back, buried him, went back out, was about 8 days. I think it was about 8 or 9 days. He was his funeral was packed out with police officers all over the country because he was an accident investigator as well, traffic officer for 37 years, very well respected.
Wow,
he was an A1 class traffic driver, so taught other drivers, which is quite strange really, because then of course I went and taught other fighter pilots, and I kind of followed.
You've obviously got that. No,
he'd sit there in his office doing the plans that you don't do anymore. They're all done on the computer, aren't they now? But back in the day, they were hand drawn.
They were my next office, and I'd meet them on many a 3 o'clock in the morning on a rainy day. I'm fascinated in that subject. The work they do is phenomenal. So you remember, so it was the hand drawn stuff.
Well, it was the head of the motorcyclist, and it would be I remember one motorcyclist went through a glass window and he'd draw a leg. And I was interested. He took me up and said, "Oh, this is what's difficult with bikes, Tim. This is why you shouldn't ride a motorcycle." Well, and he'd point to heads and legs and bits where, dark humor, isn't it? You guys use a very dark humor to get you by. Very military.
Military are the same, aren't they? We are similar breed. Yeah, we are. I think we're a similar breed. We tend to get on with each other in a pub somewhere, and I think I don't know. It's that you don't mind. I said earlier today, you don't mind getting a bit wet and cold sometimes if it's for the right reasons. And the thing I loved about it, and what I'm sure your dad, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure the reason he did it was the person's dead. So why are you doing it? It's for closure for the family. It's to give an answer for the family. And there are times when he would have come up with stuff that would have produced road improvements that then stopped other people having the same issue. The accident investigators, now collision investigators, of course, they were one with a 6-year-old with one of mine where I turned up, and I've got another armed response officer is doing CPR on a 6-year-old child. And the parents are holding hands, looking down at this child, holding the hands of their 11-year-old son. And what had happened, the car had had a collision outside, but that had stunned the innocent driver, so to speak. And so he put his foot on the accelerator and slammed it through this perfectly innocent hedge through to a car park where the 6-year-old was. Geez. And it was through the collision investigators, it was decided that actually we'll stick a middle lane on that part, because basically the car coming along, overtaking, think the car had been stationary on the side, when actually he was waiting to turn right. But because there was another car parked behind it, waiting to go straight forward, it hit the indicator. Yeah. So he just went past the offside. So a central lane to turn right solved that. So these are the things then that hopefully saved anything like that happen again, maybe shutting the door after the horse had bolted. But, you know, it's really important work. It's not just, you know, I was on Jeremy Vine some time ago and over this because of something that Jeremy Clarkson had said about, yeah, we know it's an accident, just clear the bloody thing, you know. But when you see the collision event, the accident investigator it has to be the same person who starts at the beginning of the whole scene and on their hands and knees looking at every little thing. Do they find the light bulb? Is that light bulb from the car? Yeah. Is the filament straight across? Is it bowed? Is it oxidized? Is it, you know, and getting that in there and then linking it all the way up. It's a fascinating subject, what he was involved with.
I did an accident investigation into the Red Arrows back in 2011. It's a fatality, unfortunately. And again, it's looking at that in detail. Yeah. And some people don't realize, it took us about 9 months, to be honest. The report that comes out is so comprehensive. And of course, we say that our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, are written in blood of men that have died before us, which is true.
Yeah.
When someone dies, you do an investigation, and whatever you learn from that, you put into your own SOPs, because it keeps the rest of us safer, and you keep building that up, which is exactly what you're talking about, isn't it? So going back to your Twitter, and obviously you started doing Twitter, because obviously you had a mad moment and you thought that would be a good idea. And I do remember you saying, it's a nightmare. I remember you saying,
For what?
I remember you saying you had a boss who was very good to you, and if you'd done it in, say, the Met or something, then that wouldn't have worked out.
I think most other forces.
Yeah.
I think I then said, if you want a police account, once they get to 2,000, cut them, delete them, because you will get complaints just because of the numbers involved. And some people think, well, police officers shouldn't be on Twitter anyway, so I'm going to complain. But that complaint, even though it can be dealt with quite stealthily, takes an awful lot of time. Even just to fill out the forms, to pick up the phone, to speak to the complainant, to track me down, get my side of the thing, look at the thing, go back to the complainant, fill in the forms, see if it relates to something more serious than just a local resolution sort of thing. It all takes time. And you need to find a quicker system for that. But yeah, I mean, my chief constable said to me once, he said, Sergeant Harry Tangye, we need 10 more people like you in the police service. And I said, sir, even I think I could only cope with one. Because it is.
Yeah, that's probably true. My sister still, she's a detective constable down in Hampshire, and there's a new rule that's coming in fact, which says that she actually has my father had 3 numbers in his and she managed to get those. It's now a 5-figure number apparently, and she managed to get the last 3 in her number.
Oh, and apparently, that's lovely.
Well, now apparently you're allowed to take old numbers that have been used, and so she's applied to wear his number on it, which would be a bit
lovely.
Yeah,
it's quite. Do you know what? It's just quite nice. I said before, I'm not religious or anything like that, but it's just nice to know. And my dad was born in 1909. He was a Spitfire pilot. He was air reconnaissance. And I remember him extremely well because it was more like that granddad relationship as opposed to dad. He wasn't like, come on, son, let's go down football, you know. Yeah. But he had no, I could give him a big hug and a cuddle and things. Stupid, I've forgotten what I was saying. So what you were saying, I diverted.
Right. So this is about numbers on the shoulder and about keeping things.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And I just think about, it's just nice. The grieving disappears. I was 18, and that disappears. And then you start remembering the good times and I think of them very regularly. But to have the collar number on your shoulder is just lovely. Just know that, in your own bad moments, it's collar numbers. It's almost like they're there. Yeah. Even that just thought. So, I think that's quite nice, really. And then you do see that. You see a little bit of compassion from the people who dish out numbers now and then. I don't know who gets. Well, they don't get a 1007.
Yeah, she needs something like that. I remember when she finished her basic training, and she would. My dad was very fond of her. Obviously, they're both in the same constabulary, of course, for a few years. I used to go crewing my dad in the cars when I was a teenager. He put like a reflective jacket on me, and we was going to drive up the M7 all the time. But she came out of police training, and of course, the first thing, she's only a small woman. She's going to hate me for saying this. She used to bring her asp out at everything that was going to come out. And I said, if you keep doing that, my dad said the same thing. If you keep doing that, someone's going to punch you in the face. And eventually, one day, she got punched in the face.
Oh, no.
No chivalry. Out, yeah. I got you less offensive, you know what I mean? So she's quite, but she loves the Force. And I sometimes don't know why, to be honest with you, because I know a lot of people find it very difficult. Do you want to tell us about why, did you come up to a natural retirement point then?
Yeah, I took 30 years, and people said, are you going to get rid of your farms TA stuff? Because the tactics advisors for or the operational farms commander, they're the ones who end up in court. The frontline officers rarely do, and if they do, they tend to attack why were we in this position, as opposed to, because the person who shot the bullet, usually there's no dispute. It's, well, how did that situation arise? That's how they can put it. And people say, are you going to leave it? I said, no, I'm going to carry on the same way I was going, because I was going to tempt fate if I stopped doing it, because I could go to a 999 shout or a pursuit, and I had a fair few pursuits in my last few months. And one of those, I'm relying on the guy in front to keep me out of court. That's the ridiculous thing in law at the moment. They're trying to change it, but basically, if he totals it and kills somebody, I end up in court for that. So I was thinking, well, I'm just going to carry on the same way as I was. Got to 30 years. And I'll be honest with you as well, I'm one of the last ones to get away with a reasonable pension. So I was paying sort of 14% of my wage into my pension every month. I was getting a reason why. Now, people have to work a lot longer and contribute much more for much less now. Right. So I'm going to grab it and run before they change their mind, because we all realised they'll just change the law. So they can take my commutation or tax my commutation and things like that. So, and I thought, do you know what? The reason I realised why I did Twitter as well, even though I sort of fell into it by accident, because I was doing road safety stuff, which is Learn to Live, where I did this. There's a black and white video on YouTube. I think if you search Harry Learn to Live, learn to number 2 live, one word. And it's basically, it's an account that you give at a conference, but in case I wasn't able to make it, to young people driving, they videoed it, and they grabbed me off the street, videoed it, and there's a moment in it where I have a little choky moment, because the mother of the deceased person I was talking about, walks in to do her video. And I look at her stupidly. I look at her as I mentioned her daughter, and I had a look, and that video, I think it was probably about 84,000 hits on YouTube now. And my force then said, do you fancy starting Twitter? So that's really how I got into Twitter. Little did they know.
They said that.
Little did they. Yeah. Well, they said, look, you're sharing on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. If you're going to talk about the police, you need to decide whether you're going to use yours as the police, or we start a fresh one and to only talk about the police on there. It gives them some sort of ownership, really, on what you're saying, sort of thing, which is fair enough, I think.
I think you're right.
So
yeah, it does, isn't it? But then again, the problem I found with that, because when I was doing it for the Air Force, I didn't want to be sanctioned by the Air Force. That makes sense. It's not authentic anymore, isn't it? So
no, and I wouldn't recommend people do what I do, because at the moment now they're making it more departmental. So the individuals. So if you're someone in a street and you want to know what your PCSO is doing, it's great. You can follow the PCSO. Now a lot of forces say, well, the public are confused. They need to have more departmental ones and things. So of course nobody feeds the departmental one with the nice stuff, because why should they? It's like, if it's there and then and they're doing it, it's fine. But even if the response from tweets are positive, it still creates work for the corporate comms, because the press ring the office. Oh, can you give us more on this? So you can see the dilemma they've got is, do we want to hire more cops, not hire more people in the press office? So you can see the issue. But I say Twitter is like modern day beat Bobby. You need to have the beat bobbies as well, but let's face it, there's not many about, because they're struggling to answer the 999 calls. But I can walk down the street and I can have a joke with someone. I can educate somebody about something that they've asked about or whatever. I can give advice on something else. And and whilst doing that, people are going, "Oh, he's all right. Cops aren't as bad as I thought they were," sort of thing.
Cool.
And I can do that in one tweet.
Yeah.
I can do that in one day, and I can reach 40,000 people. Whereas I'm walking down the street, you can't beat that person-on-person thing. I can say, Mrs. Smith, you remember you got your window open? You're just leaving. You left your window. Do you mean you leave your window open or something? And then yelled over the thing. Or did you hear about so-and-so down the street doing this? We think there's drugs in there or whatever. They're, of course, growing cannabis or something. So it's a sort of same thing. And then, that's so I can see the uses of it, but they're gonna have to figure out how to deal with complaints. And not deal with them in the same way as they would as if I went down the street and called someone a name.
I wanted to ask you about that. We're all following BLM and what's happening in America and burning of cities and Portland and all that kind of stuff. And black communities, it seems to be. I think in America, what we don't seem to understand is that there are black and white and Hispanic and Latino communities that are separated in a way that maybe in the UK there aren't. We tend to be much more mixed. I know we have in Birmingham, you have a higher density of Pakistanis, whatever, and because people tend to the communities, don't they? And understandably so. One of the things that was interesting to me about the black communities in America, they've got this thing about, I don't know if it's the same here, it might well be, but not grassing on does that make sense? Not grassing on each other. And then of course the problem is, well, how do you bloody cure these? How do you find the criminals then? How do you cure these things? What is that about?
I thought I would get a little bit of a backlash recently, but give it to them a very reasonable conversation. And this is what I love. Let's talk about it. Let's just be honest. Let's put our cards on the table.
Yeah, sure.
Without being slammed down saying you're a racist. Yeah. Because there's people out there. I'm in an enviable position now. Yes, I am free. I haven't got a boss.
Yeah.
But I still don't want to sound like a dick, quite frankly.
Of course.
So I'm not going to rant and rave or whatever. And actually, I know I'm not going to say anything racist or homophobic because I genuinely believe I'm not. And you don't just Tourette's racist and homophobic things out if you're not. So what I found is people who have an agenda, let's face it, people within these communities, a small amount who have an agenda and they want to get their, they want to get their name up there, whatever. And some, I believe, are some MPs. Yeah. And I just think it's just so easy to say racist. This was racist. I was stopped, therefore it's racist. We stopped thousands of white people in cars, and yet you're not discussing the subject of why did you think it was racist? So let's figure out if it was racist. Were we, were the police, is there something they need to check? Because I'm sure there's a little bit, but I have a problem when in America 90% of blacks are killed by black people. So Black Lives Matter, we know, great, you need to deal with the issues in policing, but they're not nearly as bad as the process makes it sound. I've been to America, I've been with cops there and around there. Cops are cops are cops. And 50% of the cops in New York are, under 50% are white, So they're not all white cops. You see the George Floyd thing, horrendous. But the things that I don't understand why there are plenty of amazing black people you need to hold up as an example. And I think career criminals, even though as tragic as it is, it's sad that they need to be held up as the prime example. And I think it's really important for policing. Yes, it's good that police communicate with the communities, but we need the communities to speak to the police as well. And I think it's this culture of you don't talk to the cops is so damaging. And people have got to stop protecting their serious high-end criminals if we need to, sort of improve things. Because at the moment, it's like, blame the authorities. The authorities are there. Let's blame them. Blame them. Blame them. You're not doing this and that.
Easy to blame authorities.
It's easy. And can we just be honest? Can we just chat?
It's like,
and you tell me your side and I'll give you my side, and let's see if we come to sort of some middle ground.
It's like calling someone a racist, isn't it? Very easy to do that. It's the same thing if you want to go protesting. It's very easy to carry a placard, but have you actually done the work? Have you done the reading? People contact me and they say, Tim, I want to be a fast jet pilot. Can you tell me how much fast jet pilots earn? Well, you can type it into Google, and you literally you get the page where the Royal Air Force tells you exactly how poor you're going to be the rest of your life. You know, it's right there. And so for me, it's like I'm not doing the work for you because you haven't done the work yourself. And I think that's the thing with communities, isn't it? That are policed. The communities do sometimes need to have to do that work themselves. It can't be left alone to law and order. I mean,
I think like everyone, it's like the police. We have to look at ourselves and check ourselves and say, okay, hang on a minute. Have we gone down a line here that this isn't? Because we can all show the screen. I'll know all the ones where the police have merrily messed it up. Okay, and you know, it's going to happen with so many people working in the police, dealing with millions of jobs and driving millions of miles in a year. There's going to be some bad things happen, guys. You know, and I guess it's my point is if it happens, let's not just. You ask the police to not stereotype people. Let's try not to stereotype the police as well. There's some good people in there. I would not have worked within the police service if I was looking around at people that I didn't want to be with, you know. And I've worked in London a lot, and I lived in London for a small time, but I don't pretend to know. Maybe I'm looking at it from the outside. I can see it. It just seems common sense to me that we're not talking about. There was a student, white female student, who I said, well, okay. I said, well, you know, talk to me. What's the issues that you can see? It was about 10 seconds into the 2-minute rant that I realized I hadn't understood the first 10 seconds of words. She was just regurgitating this rhetoric that she had learned and was just shouting at me. And yeah, it wasn't aggression. It was, well, you don't understand because I can't understand a word you're saying. I'm sorry. Can you just slow down? Can we have a talk?
Yeah, God forbid, have a conversation. That will never catch on. It might be some facts.
It is frustrating.
You might actually bring out some facts there, Harry. He's not going to like that because then you're going to smash through her feelings, like I said last night. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You know, and I think we're coming through a little bit now because, and thank goodness, because it was going to be a very dangerous world with society being shaped on complete lies and people being fearful to just speak what they mean. And I know that people look at the police and go, for God's sake, why don't you say something? Because there are tripwires that have been set out. Yeah. And if you step on one, the police, the professional complaints, you know, IOPC, even some supervisors would say, well, if we take his side, it will make us look as though we're racist because it will just throw out. So you avoid the whole thing. You avoid it. And that is so
unhealthy. We don't do the talking. We don't have the conversation then. We don't do the talking that we need to do. We don't do the work on ourselves. I run men's groups. I run a group called Spin Recovery for men basically going through transition. But a lot of men that come to me are on the verge of killing themselves. All their marriage is falling apart. And I say to them when they start this course, it's for 12 weeks online, I say, there's work to be done in here. It's, you know, you've paid a couple of grand for this. There is work to do. I'm there to do the work with you. But men understand. I'm using men and women, but I'm using men and boys in that term, you know, because you can be a boy. At the age of 55, you can be a boy. But men know that work has to be done because you don't gain any value unless you actually do the work. Things are valuable, take work. That makes a lot of sense, you know?
Yeah. So it's so true. I loved your comment. You came on and you said, for God, guys, if you're feeling suicidal, just give me a call for Christ's sake. Yeah. Before you do, just do it because it's just so, you know, and I mean, I've been in many positions talking on a bridge or a multi-story car park to people, and sometimes you listen to their stories and you think, in your mind, you're thinking, Jesus, and this is you think, Jesus, if I'd gone through that, I'd be standing on that bloody thing. And all you can offer them is to say, and I said it, is that, look, at least things are moving slowly. At least we are able to talk about it. It's in mainstream. So it's no longer hidden. And so there is hope with that things will improve. And I promise you that sometime in the future, you'll look back and be glad you didn't jump. And, you know, and only one of them did jump after I I'd been there for 3/4 of an hour with them, and but it is so frustrating because the statistics, as well as, of course, with the children of people who've committed suicide, are more likely to as well. It's just frustrating, and talking's a good thing.
Well, I do it too much. You don't get the pub anymore. You shut your police clubs down, for crying out loud. I remember I used to be there with my dad. He was in the Hampshire Male Voice Choir, the police male voice choir.
Yeah,
he was from the valleys in southern Wales, and so of course it'd all be big Welshmen knocking about singing as these men do. But he'd leave his pint in the barn. When I was young, he stick my crisps in it. I used to hate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, really, somebody, a sergeant, when I was a PC, when they were shutting down the canteens, and they said, "You're not just shutting down the canteen; you're ripping out the heart of the station." Absolutely. The pantomimes went at Christmas. The bars. I remember that. And the pantomime where they whipped the hell out of the bosses. And I said, what you can have now, you can have someone say, and again, I think we're really fortunate in Devon and Cornwall, but you can have someone going to work on their own and self-briefing. Yeah. They then get sent out, and somebody else might come and join, but they're doing other stuff, self-briefing as well. There's a shout. So they go to, single crew, they go to a job, and they go to a cop death. They go to a fatal road traffic collision. It's 20 minutes while you're trying to save this guy before the ARVs and traffic are turned up, because they're traveling from, sort of 40 miles away. And then, of course, what they forget is instead they come back to the station because they're late off, or the crewmate, or the other guy who's working is late off, and so they go home, and they were going home on their own. Of course, they're dealing with a divorce. They're dealing with a child who is kicking off at school, who is being bullied or is the bully. They have all those problems. And in a bar, when there was more officers, where you were more likely to be double crewed, and that you de-stress, and I'm so worried for the future. Because I know with PTSD, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading some stuff on it, and especially with the military type stuff, and they find that it can really come out 14 years later. It's when it can come out. So it's not. So I've dealt with children we recovered the child and had to climb in and drag her out of this camper van, and the father had horrendously been gone into underneath of a lorry, and his body was out. They were together, and the first thing she said to us was, "My daddy's dead, isn't he?" And you think, so she will get all the help that she needs, hopefully, but that even though the message might come back, she's doing all right, and all that, it could kick her in the guts when she's much older. That's the problem. What do you do about yourself? So it's got to be. What are you doing about yourself? Sorry, what are you doing about yourself here? Because you've had a lifetime of this stuff, and I know how my father. Don't get me wrong, and I know what he did about it. Especially when the police club shut, he went across the road to the pub and he sat there and chatted to local criminals and people, whoever he found. That's exactly what he did. Poachers used to bring him loads of rabbits home. He was like, "I don't want the rabbits," but. So how do you manage? I remember one morning opening the door, being a bundle of rabbits and chickens. I'm going, so poachers literally just given a police officer. Brilliant. You must have good days.
But you must have colleagues that you talk this about, because you can't keep this all inside. You wrote a book, didn't you? And I can't, unfortunately, get a picture of your book on this new screen I'm using because I don't know how to do it.
Look, you mentioned that. That's it then.
You share a screen. Well, you put there you go. There you go.
And there you go. Firearms and Fatals.
I haven't read it. I don't want your but you know what I mean? I will get around to it at some point. How's it going?
Yeah, it's on there, but please don't, because I get so embarrassed when people say, "Oh, I haven't read it yet," and please don't. Do you know what? It might be nice at a time, or I find a lot of coppers who either they've just retired or they're just joining. They buy it and they find it quite useful. I get lovely comments back, and it goes into that sort of thing. Why I think I've probably managed to get through. I think a lot of it is because I was a sergeant of an armed response unit, which meant even though there's like 5 other units in Devon and Cornwall, because it's such a big area, you work very closely with about 6 of you. And you lived and breathed everything together. And you went to, and because in Devon and Cornwall, I was just as likely I would go to a violent domestic or anything any job that response would go, far less often, but response are used up. There's a bit of emergency still. There's an ARV. Of course they're going to use us. All right. So that's where we'd go. So go to absolutely everything. I found it's very different from military for a start, because I have got 5-10 minutes warning about it generally.
Yeah,
so I'm driving. I'm driving single crewed. I know I'm going to be the first one to the scene. I know there's a badly injured person. There's possibly a fatality. I'm thinking in my mind, right, with the ARVs, first aid kit's exactly where I know it's going to be. I've got an idea of what I'm going to do, first of all, and what I'm going to delegate. I know where I'm going to put the vehicle, hopefully, as I approach. And I know exactly then I've got that system and I've done it long enough. To me, if a person's dead, if you look at the eyes, the soul's gone. They are like a shirt. And someone very nastily, Tim, mentioned that we clashed. Can you imagine? We didn't mention that before, did we?
Now that is absolutely it. They don't deserve to be an FTP.
I did offer to Tim. I said, "Do you want me to change your shirt?" That shows maybe.
You're naked sitting there with some weird.
Yeah, I was. Well, it was because I did a podcast earlier with Chris Dangerfield, and he has a deerstalker hat, and he's got a goatee beard, and he's got braces over a top, and he's topless. So I just joined him. I just did this. I started it because I thought he's got a hard crowd to please. He's a lovely guy. I love the guy, and So I thought, well, that would break the ice. But yeah, I am. I think we do talk about it, and if I was with a group of people and they'd say, for example, they went to a hanging in the woods, all right, so they're looking for the woods for a teenager, and they come across his body. So the next morning, because there's lots of work involved and there's lots of stuff, and then the next morning on there, tea comes on, big teapot, and I go and we're chatting, saying, "Oh, how's it going?" And I said, and I'll say, "Chris, did you actually did you have to cut down the body, or did you see it, and what were the circumstances, mate?" He goes, "Oh yeah, no, I went round, I think it was Dave, didn't you come and then da-da-da-da?" And then you've got that conversation going, and I think it's just so useful, as opposed to right, well, we're going to diffuse everybody. So first of all, we're going to talk about the incident, and then we're going to say how we feel about it, and then but going back, the military is different because it's happened and it's your mate. That's different. I think that's massively different. But I think with your dad, and like I've been seen with the collision investigators, sometimes, not going too morbid, but the car is so damaged, the bodies, or once recently with 3 bodies are twisted inside, and you can't get them out without breaking the whole thing up. So your dad would be keen to know, he's looking at, was it mechanical failure? Was it suicide? Was it just bad driving? Was they distracted? Was it bad road conditions? Was it weather conditions? Were they dazzled by the sun on the wet roads, sort of thing? So he's going through these. So, or was it murder because somebody's cut the brake pipes, or did the MOT garage fail to screw the nuts up? So sometimes you have to leave the bodies in there whilst he is very close and very personal, getting the evidence from these people. And it is spooky, and there's a few that pop up to me now and then, but I think sometimes it's a little lucky, but then I think if you're someone who doesn't talk very much, or you're in such a massive section, it's too impersonal, and you're not able to get it out your system, so to speak. And to me, I found that bodies and things, you can only make them look so gory,
Of course.
Even horror films, they struggle after a while, so they stick music in, and you don't get the music, so you think, right, if you break a body up even more and throw in some more red stuff, it looks as bad as the last lot. What gets me is very much the circumstances around it, and it's seeing the 3 teenagers in their in more stylish clothing than us, perhaps, but looking as though they could just open the door and walk out.
Especially when there isn't that damage to the body necessarily. And
exactly, more so. It's that, like, there's the 6-year-old I mentioned was the same age as my twins I've got at the time. And as I walked up to the shoulders of, I was walking up from behind of the ARV who'd got there first, and they were doing CPR. As I looked round, I saw these little knobbly legs, and the last time I'd seen those knobbly legs was my son that morning. Cool. You know, and I looked round and I thought, shit, and my mind went, it's you know, it's my son, you know, and I knew it wasn't my son, but it looked exactly like my son. And then it's at that point you got to think, I've got to some sort of order here. Yeah. You need to take stock a little bit sometimes, you know. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, we debrief every flight we do in the military, and we brief and debrief. In fact, it takes a long time. I mean, planning for a trip to take up 3 hours, and of course you're with the same people. You can be leading a 4-ship if you're a 4-ship leader, so you've got another 7 people there and maybe a bounce aircraft. You've got like 10 people that you're briefing. Then when you come back, you debrief that possibly for an hour or longer. I mean, I think the debriefing really helps in all those situations. And sometimes if you don't get that and you're saying, you know, single crewed, self-briefing, we call it self-auth, the same thing. But you come back to the station and then you literally get in your car and go home. You don't see anyone anymore. Yeah. You carry those problems. Yeah. You know, of course, the divorces happen because you say to your, you know, the wife says, "How are you today?" "Well, let me tell you about my day." Hear it. We did the same thing though, because I'd come back from like leading a night sortie or something, or I don't even know, or a day, you know, very complicated sorting, loads of work. Come back, go home, and she say, "Do you want to go to Tesco's?" And you're like, "No, I don't want to go to Tesco's. I've got no interest. I want to crash out on the sofa and not do anything for another, you know, for 24 hours." But I think it is important though to get that stuff across. And I think my sister would quite like. She's probably read your book already, to be honest with you. But she talked about it quite a lot. The stuff she sees, there's a lot of Portsmouth goes. She's in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
It goes through. It's a bit of an island, really. Portsmouth. You can't really expand it like you can Southampton. But as a detective constable, she sort of goes. They go through a spate of either, you know, crimes with kids like paedophilia and stuff, and then they go through a spate of murders, and then it goes through a spate of, you know, it just seems to go in clusters. And of course, at the moment, you know, I'd say to her, "What are you dealing with at the moment?" "Oh, there was this guy, and he's just killed 3 people, and we've just found him." And it's a crazy world that she lives in. It's very detached, I think.
I mean, I had complete admiration for her, because just the administration around that for a start, and the hours, the pressure, there's constantly more being pulled in on top of, and that is really, again, they have the section and things like that, but I just wonder, you don't get that camaraderie then with, you know, with that. We were lucky, but I'm very interested in this because I read Mandy Hickson's book as well, and I got the same sort of feeling. There's so much training and so much pressure, even if they're not ticking the box to pass you fit to fly for the next, you know, 4 months or whatever. You don't want to look a twat in front of your friends. So you've got that personal pride that when I'm going, you know, dressed up to the nines with the guns, and I've been given a briefing that there's a couple of baddies in there, and there's all these things you've got to follow. You can't just go in there and get the baddie, because there's procedures and things where you need to stop, look at it and think, right, are you getting sucked through? Right, inform the boss again. Can we go further? Right, okay, off we go further. And if you skip that, that's a big no-no, because it means you're getting sucked in, you're getting red mist and whatever. And sometimes, and you've got to react in a second what's going in ahead of you. You're going through the door and there's a target there, but they're holding a baby. So you just need to deal with them as you've got stooges and things. Now that's every 5 weeks, well, every 6 weeks, but from the end of one, and it's lovely. I always said you've got to sit in the uncomfortable seat to have the fun bits. So for you to fly Tornadoes, the GR4, didn't you?
There it is. Yeah,
that's right. And Hawks, it's great, but it'd be lovely. People would pay a lot on a stag do to do what I did: go through buildings with paintballs and blah 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 blah. But because you got the pressure, you can't really. How many times did you? I'd love to know. How many times did you actually get in a plane and say, "Right, go and have fun"? Did you have that, or was everything an exercise or a training thing?
This is where
could you just, or is it right? Okay, unofficially, go no more. Right?
No, it's not. I'm just saying. And you know, your brain goes, "Does not compute." What do you mean, fun in aeroplanes? You don't ever. No one gives you a jet. I remember I had a friend on F-18s in the States, and he one day they gave him a jet to himself, and he's like, because F-18, his F-18 was a single seat variant of the aircraft. And they said, yeah, go and take the jet and go and do some exercise. And he's like, what am I going to do by myself? It's the most boring thing in the world. It sounds because
yeah, I suppose, because once you've thrown it around the sky, and you've done that for several years, you're throwing it around the skies. And with ARVs, I mean, I'd be driving literally every day. I'd be topping 135, 140 mile an hour, cross country, not cross country, but down motorways, literally, and when safe to do it. And there are times, and through the countryside, and we'd rant along the countryside. And usually, if we were in convoy going to a serious injury, and we knew that it was going to be a little while for other emergency services to get there, because we know where it is, we'd absolutely blat it. But we'd blat it because the training is always, yes, you can go fast as long as it's safe. And I knew in a 30-year career, if I went to my 100%, one day I'd fall 101% over that, and the consequences would be massive. So I always stayed 5-10%. And someone was with me, and I was joining a motorway, and I was absolutely flying up this motorway. It was HGV, car. And there was a space in front of the HGV. And it was sort of ending, and I just pulled everything, slowed it up, went in behind the HGV, paused, out, gone, lane 2 again, lane 3. And he said, I was interested to see what you'd have gone then. I said, immediately your ego takes over is when it will bite you in the backside just one day.
That's all.
You're not going to be perfect every day. I'd be perfect one day, actually.
Same with flying, isn't it? I don't say pilot.
It's very kind of you to compare the two. It isn't, but I've got less controls to deal with.
I did exactly the same job as you for a very long time on the old, the cars he brought home, some of the classics, the Jaguars and the Granadas, solid old, big old cars. And he brought the BMW into service, and then they stayed with BMWs, I believe, in Hampshire at the time.
They were great. We had the 5 series BMWs.
They're still using it. They had a Senator, a Vauxhall Senator, so some old stuff. Yeah, but no, he did say. I mean, that's exactly it. And there is a control element there. And my father was a restrained man, I think. And in the same with flying, the moment I don't know any. When I say this, every pilot in the world agrees with me, but it's not necessarily true. If you see what I mean? We're talking about ego. So here's me saying that pilots don't have an ego. Well, of course they do have an ego. Everyone has an ego. You have an ego. I have an ego. What I mean is, it's not in the way people think. Because as soon as there's no pilot I wouldn't have flown with. I mean, there are some nationalities that I'd rather not. But in the Royal Air Force,
training, I understand.
But my wife flew back of the Hawk. This one, the T1. This is a T2. One of my men, and complete trust. They used to do it back in the day. By the way, if you do 3 years at Valley, they took the wives flying. But these men don't have huge egos. They're control. They like to be in control. That's a big thing with pilots, to be in control.
Do you know what? The one thing I really admire about the services, especially the RAF, and I had to think for a second there, because you went from Coldrose, I knew very well at Coldrose, didn't you? But from the Navy to the RAF, and which is exactly what my dad did with Spitfires. I've gone again, mate. I've done 2 podcasts. That's it. I'm dead. Thank God I've retired.
You spread yourself too thinly because you went to see Chris earlier. Now you've used up.
It took all my energy. It took all my energy.
Taking it all.
It took all of it. No, okay. The one thing I really admire, and that the police are just getting hold of slowly now, is this blame culture with the police. Right, you've done something that has created something. Right. You've you left your gun on the toilet cistern or something, or you crashed the car with this, whatever. Right, okay, we're going to go through the professional standards. We're going to interview you, and if there's any offences, we'll deal with you. The RAF have a much better system where it is much easier to declare mistakes, because mistakes in the RAF lead to death a lot easier than with police. So your aircraft falls out of the sky. if you made an error because you were tired because of something else that had occurred or something like that, I don't know, or there was the levers were slightly different on the different thing or whatever. And so it really comes to the forefront, doesn't it? And it's therefore discussed, and therefore I presume people feel more able to admit they're not perfect, and therefore their ego is, you're able to live with it a bit more. We're getting there slowly with the police, I think.
I do realise this. My sister says the same thing. We have a just culture in the services, and we have something called we use something called a flowchart analysis of investigative results, which is it's called a FAIR chart by Bain Simmons, and it basically it starts off in the top left hand corner or something, and it ends up in the bottom right hand corner, and it says, there's mistakes, there's errors, there's negligence, there's sabotage, and it will lead you down one of these things just by asking really simple questions. And the thing is, if I was to, every time I flew, I would do something wrong, but it wasn't malicious. It was just a mistake. Whenever you fly, you make mistakes. Whenever you drive, I'm assuming you make a mistake or two. Now, if I was to, this is why young students, we didn't launch on students for basic errors that the instructors will make as well. It's just basic errors. You're going to make them forever. And no pilot I knew ever did anything malicious with an airplane because the rest of the community would turn on them. You see, it's not.
Funny, that's that rings a bell. Yeah,
I
know it's not very well known of, but if you had a bad cop in amongst the cops that I know, they would turn on them. They wouldn't want them because
they're not trusted.
They're going to reflect on them.
Yeah,
and they've invested too much into to doing the job that they want to do, and they don't want anything to stain that. But always, and a bit of a jokey thing, I must admit. Because I've always been I would never have been able to fly because looking at you on the desert thing, chatting away and doing all your thinking and stuff like that and all that, I knew that it's just not me. It's not my thing. I can't do that. But I knew that I found my thing because I wanted to get out there. There's nothing more satisfying for me, for example, than going to someone who's crashed their car and their whole world has finished. They're like, oh my God, and they got cars whacking by them. Wow, it's at night, it's raining. They're scared to death. They didn't know we didn't know where to come out, and you turn up and within 5 minutes, they're like, oh, thank God. Look, it's plastic, it's metal. No one's hurt. We can't go on holiday next week. Yes, go on holiday next week. That's what you pay your premiums from. The insurance will sort it out. Do you know what I mean? And it was just able to. That was the most lovely, and it is quite satisfying shoving a gun up the nose of some horrible, despicable person who had enjoyed bullying, some people with a gun earlier. And that's quite satisfying, in fairness. But the majority of it, I think, was just the ordinary humane stuff. That's the bit I love. I would love to have. Because I knew a lot of people in Culdrose, and so was particularly with Merlin. I was fortunate enough to fly a Merlin helicopter, to actually fly it and land it. Was I allowed to do that? I landed the helicopter.
Helicopters are evil. We don't talk about helicopters on this channel.
Well, I know. There,
Harry. Have a read of the title.
A week later, it crashed, but it wasn't my one. My one didn't crash, but another one did.
Really?
Luckily, no fatalities.
People listen to this. You're going to get the blame for that now. And you're
sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't know the etiquette. It's a bit like saying the Q word in the police. But I used to say quiet a lot. Isn't it quiet? Because I didn't want a quiet night.
Yeah, exactly. Extended shift and everything. Yeah, crikey. It's interesting, actually. You talked about getting into the police force because I think a lot of police officers go into the police force because of the injustice in the world, and I think you talked about the bullies out there and stuff, and how you wanted to sort of go and do something about that. Is that quite common that a lot of officers go in for that?
Okay, look, if I'm really honest, it was when I was 10 years old, and I went to a police open day, and I sat in a police Panda car, Ford Escort, I think.
Classic.
And there were two little switches, and one said blue light.
Yeah, one light. Yeah.
And one said horns.
Wow.
Not even siren. Yeah. And there was the radio. The radio was there. And I actually applied when I was 10 years old, saying, "Can I join the police, please?" And I got a lovely letter back from the inspector saying, "We'd love to. We're so glad you're interested, and thank you for coming to Open Day. And we'd love to see you in about 9 years' time. So just be as practical as you can, and be as good as you and helping all that." And And that's why when I get students or new recruits or something, I always, in my direct messages, always answer them and things like that, because it's just so important. And but the other reason, I guess, is, and I say to my units, when we're getting absolutely hammered by the press and sometimes the public because of the protests, that didn't feel that there was being protested fairly, which I agree, quite frankly. I think it was poor decisions by some bosses onto how things were dealt with, without a doubt. I think you should deal with the protest as a protest and with relevance to the amount of violence you're getting from that protest, not who is protesting. I think it's a very dangerous place to go to. And I think it got a little bit political with some people.
This is the knee, taking knees and things.
Yeah, the knee thing. I think there's some young cops about who got confused and didn't know what the knee actually meant. I tend to research things, and I saw that it was all written down what it meant, and I knew the end. But I think you're getting a lot more inexperience now as well, which is the problem with that. But yeah, no, the enjoyment. And so when we were getting all that flack, I said to my section, look, forget the outside world. Look after yourself. Make sure that your integrity, your honesty, and the way you work as hard as you can every day to help the people that matter, that deserve our help. Look after everyone around you in your little bubble, and F everyone else, quite frankly, because you won't be able to cope with everyone else right now. And it is just keep your head down. And that's what I say I get to a lot of officers from London saying, oh, thank you so much. Your book was great. It helped me, this, that, and the other. And thank you for saying the things you do, because we it's lovely that people say it how it is and this sort of thing, because they're really feeling that they're getting a battering. And sometimes I think it's not the actual frontline cops' fault so much.
No, it's I think the problem is when mixed messaging comes out of the authority, in effect, it's just mixed messaging. The taking the knee thing was, I knew as soon as they did that, it never ends, unfortunately, with what we would call the woke movement or liberal left, pathological left, far left. It doesn't matter what it is. It's we all understand what it is.
Yeah,
we all understand what. Of course we do. But once you do one thing, they want another, don't they? And then another. So in America, they're doing restaurants and getting you to put your fist in the air. And if you don't, if you do that, you got to do something else and then something else. And so it never ends. It never ends.
That's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous situation generally.
This is why
with how it is at the moment.
Don't give an inch.
But I'll tell you now, majority of the cops think the same.
Yeah, cool.
Because cops are practical people, and they know pretty much what's good and what's bad. They like evidence. So if the evidence doesn't actually, well, why are they saying that when actually the truth is this? So why? And if I challenge them on that in the nicest possible way, I get told that I'm this. Well, I think personally that movement put us back at least a decade, 2 decades. I hope it can be recovered just as quickly. Now.
I think it will be, because it's actually, there was a talk by a guy called Yuri, something on I'll have to put in the notes. He was a Russian dissident, and he was ex-KGB, and he came over to America, and he gave a load of talks about subversion and what happens with subversion, and how a population has to wish itself to be subverted. So we allow in a lot of different materials, books, magazines from all over the world. And some of these other countries, Japan apparently didn't. If you try to sell a television in Japan, a couple of decades ago, they turn you away because they don't want your television. But so we have to. It takes generations apparently. So it can take 20 years or something for this to get in, and we're seeing this now. From, if you think about it, the mid-90s, we're now seeing it in America and UK. I mean, I don't need 2 aircraft carriers, do we? If we're fighting amongst ourselves, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So I think we're starting to understand. And BLM itself, I remember they took down. I remember looking up BLM. Went onto the webpage. It talked about breaking up the nuclear family. It talked about defunding the police and all these kind of things.
But and the UK one didn't just stop at defunding the police. They said get rid of it.
Yeah,
plain as anything, in black and white, straight from the beginning.
Yeah,
funny enough, but straight from the beginning. And I screenshot the pages and said to the people who are saying, "Oh, you're just being this." No, that's the issue I've got. I haven't got the issue with the colour in the slightest. If anybody came and said, "This is what we want to do," I would tell them to swivel and go away. I'm not interested. That's not my purpose. You, by all means, protest and get You know, if people know the truth and they outvote me, that's the voting system. You know, that's fine. Yeah. I'm not calling you something to shut you up so you can't say what you want to say. You know,
it's clever though. The title Black Lives Matter. They called it that for a reason, of course, because Black lives do matter. You know, let's be honest. Of course they do. But over here, we don't have the racial intolerance that we seem to see across in the States. It just isn't something here that we have. So guys like you and me and the crowd on FJP and everyone else will sit here and go, what is this about? I don't understand. What is this about? Now, I did a video last night, in fact, about diversity and inclusion training in the Royal Air Force. I fight against this because it's really dividing the service. A lot of
saw it.
You saw that one, did you? Yeah.
The email. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because it was an email, and I spoke to the pilot about it. Actually, he's a good lad. But he got into trouble from that. I didn't realize he actually did get some action taken against him for that. I was shocked. I didn't realize. Another guy, of course, or girl, I don't know who it is, was anonymous because he actually asked me. He said, "Do you know who it is that complained about me?" And I get sent a lot of stuff from the service, but I said, genuinely, I don't. He said,
"You get information fed to you. It's quite nice. It means you know."
Yeah, well, they do
more of what it is. But
they want it. People sometimes write to me, and some things I've got to be careful about putting up because it's not right. You know, same thing with you in the police force. It's not right. You know, the service is trying to do the best thing it can. It's just about 50 years behind where it should be when it comes to how to do diversity and inclusion training.
Do you know what? I just think it was just taken for granted that this was the way to teach diversity inclusion, and it became I remember a gay man came in and to do some diversity training with our force once many years ago, and the officers have said we just sat there and listened to basically the fact about how homophobic we were, and they said all we saw was a guy with a massive chip on his shoulder.
Seriously.
I mean, and of course it costs a bomb to put this through. I wouldn't mind if it was balanced right, and I'm sure there's some really good stuff out there, but actually society's got it wrong at the moment. I think, you know, it's because of the cards that have been thrown out for whatever subject you're talking about. And it shuts down conversation straight away. If you've got a boss, if you need to make money on whatever, I'm in a very fortunate position at the moment where I still agree that if I don't feel strong enough on any extremes to get shouty about it. Of course. And I think generally the good will come through. Generally, I think that there is a majority there, and we'll get a little bit sensible in the end. But I don't know how many people will have to die in the meantime. That's the
majority they call it, don't they? The silent.
Yes, the silent majority, and they are there. And whether you are Brexit or not Brexit, not interested in either side or whatever, but that proved that what was the media and the front thing wasn't necessarily what was happening for real.
You're being told how to vote. Everyone was telling people how to vote. That was the problem. And the British public don't like being told how to vote. And so
no. And well, my brother lives in France, right? And he visited London, a very good friend of his in London. And he said to and they were talking about this Brexit thing. We shouldn't go on this too long, but it's nothing too controversial. It's to prove a point, really. And and he said, so why, you know, Brexit is terrible because we lose all this thing and the other. And of course, Europe, we won't be able to easily go to holidays. And you say, okay, so what does the guy in a council estate in Liverpool, what does he go on holiday every year to Europe and all that? And he says, so, okay, so if he does this, you tell him why it's positive to stay, you know, and he wasn't able to answer. And again, I think it's this communication with 21st century. We've got all this communication.
Rubbish. You're rubbish at it. I'll tell you what's funny. People like Katie Hopkins and stuff, as much as she says horrible things, she's gone to Parler now, hasn't she? She's got kicked off Twitter. As much as she says horrible things, I still love the fact that she has a voice. And I don't want to silence her. You know, I mean, it's easy, but
very good.
the fact that we when we start silencing people, that's the end now. This whole cancel culture stuff, isn't it? Because well, terms like BAME for me are inherently racist. And I hate using that term.
Yeah, no, I know, because it divides the whites from everybody else, and everybody else is different, and then the whites are single.
And if you're not white, you're in a box. I mean, how racist is that? It's awful.
I know.
It doesn't matter whether you're Vietnamese or whatever. You're BAME. You're BAME. You are.
You know. What you said earlier is I've said a number of times, and is the fact that I am so glad there are outspoken people in the world, such as Katie Hopkins. And what you like about, and for some reason, you've got to like everything somebody says, not just some, and dislike immensely something else they say. You're either all in for it or for all or nothing. But if you have these people, and you got Trump and obviously, all these, you've got the ones that stick out. I'm so glad they exist, because if they didn't, then it would be even more.
Oh, what? It'd be 1984, wouldn't it? It would just be this flat. Gray.
Yeah, it would be. Nobody would be able to, at least if we're ticking along here and then they go whack up there, then maybe the ticking along may be up here.
Conversations that
time,
now. Yeah. That's
I think thank God. But it doesn't mean I have to agree with her about cockroaches.
I know. And the thing about it is, though, I spoke to her once. She was an ex-army officer. And I was like, why'd you do it? She goes, well, sometimes you have to be looked at. So you've got to, I mean, Piers Morgan makes a career out of it, doesn't he, crying out loud? You've got to say controversial things. And I don't say controversial things because I want to stand out. I might say controversial things because I believe in them. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I'm not in Kate Hopkins' shoes. That's her entire job, is doing that. She had to. She just paid out a whole world of cash, didn't she? Some journalists. I mean, so she's delicate. She is delicate at what she says, but she can go brutal and over the top. But then we know that conversation does drive to the far right and the far left, doesn't it? Of course it does. It will push people out.
Yeah, that's true. And we also know that there were some really just concerned people in Dover who were concerned and once chosen. And of course, it's the extreme right. And, one of a few, I don't know how many there were, but there was a few, you're going to get the extremes or wherever you are. And it's just important to just differentiate and say, well, I'm not there. I'm there because that seems fair and, fair as, and realistic and practical for everything. But, I think like you say, I think the agreement we have is you don't shut down conversation.
Well, we try not to shut down conversation, but of course, I mean,
but they do. It has been done. It's been done for several years.
We do shut it down, don't we? And that's the worst thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't get me wrong. I have problems with hate speech laws, and the reason I know they protect people, I fully get it. But that's the problem I have with it. Is who's writing these hate speech laws, and what group put in there next to protect? And then you're protecting everyone. Now we can't say.
I agree. I think there's very few, and I think if people can actually come up with instances, yes, we know where they said, look, gets arrested for this. And even Katie Hopkins herself has said, I got arrested, I got interviewed for this, and I think these things come in phases where, and it shouldn't, it's wrong. But I think you've got bosses in the police, especially in the Met and things, who are under the microscope. Right, this is hate crime, this person, and they're thinking, right, we've got to, with any crime, we can use discretion. Proportionality, discretion, and eventually, if it goes to court, is it in the public interest? So it doesn't mean just because you see a crime, you have to do something. But then, I've been to families who are absolutely destroyed because they have mental health reasons. They are vulnerable people. I hate these catchwords, but they were. If you describe somebody who's vulnerable, they are vulnerable. And care in the community means, ta-da! Work, you deal with it yourself out there and care in the community, and they're getting abuse from the neighbours, and they're being told all this, that, and the other. And we know a couple of sort of cases where the mother killed her daughter and then herself. I mean, just awful things. I think the really bad extreme examples are rare, and I think it's sort of leveled out now to, at the end of the day, we only want the bad guys. That's generally what we're looking for. But I think that the press and groups were saying, oh, this. Why haven't you done it? And then we've got a complaint system that says, why didn't you do that? We're investigating it. and therefore now you're dealing with a complaint system that goes on for years and years. You know, which hopefully a little bit better now. But who knows? Yeah. So I think it's human beings are involved, and that's the problem. I think I'm really keen for people out there to let us know. Do you think it's leveled out a bit with the hate crime, or is there still loads of ridiculous things that make it rather?
I think we've got some good people in the chat. I'm looking at some names now. Actually, there's some good people there. And thank you for using the super chat earlier.
Andrew's joined us. Is that Andrew? Andrew put me on to you, and he's just joined in the chat there. So thank you, Andrew. You're an absolute star.
I can't see that. Andrew there. Okay. Yeah. That one there. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Nice guy actually. Approached me and said maybe we'll get together and have a chat. It's pretty good. I mean, I think the press take a huge amount of responsibility. What should we do? Just run this for another 15 minutes, and then we.
Okay.
Is that right? Run another 15 minutes. That's an hour and a half. That's good quality content, then, isn't it? And I think.
Well, I don't know about that. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah. You just happen to be a bit, but really. Press have a huge responsibility, and this is what I find odd: is whoever told them that they could talk to the world about what was going on. These are just journalists. There's no special qualification. They never signed anything saying I'm going to be honest in what I report. Of course, it's got angles. And I remember when those young girls in Rotherham were being groomed by an Asian gang, and it came out that it was a gang, and they never said anything about ethnicity. And yet, when you hear about those girls, it was the saddest thing because those girls had so little in their life, so little, that they would go back again to be abused with these men just because they were getting attention. Does that make sense?
It absolutely sense. And that's exactly it. And it's a bit like gang crime because a lot of the time it's the only family they feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everyone wants a smile on someone's face when they walk towards them and they go, "Oh, it's you! Yeah. Great to see you." But unfortunately, it's not for the right reasons, as we know. And the Rotherham one thing is an example on its own where the police horrendously got it wrong. But I remember the atmosphere there where you had to get it right when it involved race, because the police and race was very much up there, and absolutely no excuse. But I see the reason. I can see how it happened. I totally see how it happened because
I'm not saying right.
Because it needed a very brave person on their own in the wilderness to say to start it all off.
There was a lady, wasn't
I think if they knew it was going on, whatever, I think it was. Oh, I don't know. I wasn't there. It was just disgusting, wasn't it? And thank God it came through in the end. But
it's that though, isn't it?
Is it like you say? It's a thin line because you describe someone as male involved in a shooting, black male, so, and then the other argument was, well, there was a guy involved in a shooting and you didn't say he was a white male. So it's that, but then it's something that it's important to the story, horrendous story with Rotherham was the fact that have we got an issue here with a certain group of people, with how it's felt women should be treated or whatever like that, whatever it is, can we discuss it in the open? With because we all know it's not like a race thing. It's the fact that there is, through circumstances, through social, being brought up or whatever in an area of really poor and whatever, that they've got to this position. So I don't think anyone. Well, I'm sure there'll be some idiot who say, the thing. It's nice to be able to talk about it a little bit more. It's something I wouldn't be able to talk about not so long ago, but
I think.
You've still got to be careful, haven't you? Because you'll step on that.
Well, you will, but you know what? Here's the thing. I've thought about this as well. What's the alternative? The alternative is to say nothing at all. So, and in the military, when I was writing, I'd write essays. I mean, you know this because you've got a huge Twitter following. But sometimes you'll send out a tweet and wake up in the morning and go, and what? You know the feeling. I know you do. And I'd write an essay and I'd put it on my website and I'd go to work the next day, knowing that the boss is going to call me into the office because I've criticised the airport somewhere. Some of the instructors would be looking at me funny, and I end up being a very senior instructor anyway. But they say, "Well, I don't think this is right, Tim." But it would generate a conversation, and that's what we have to do: is generate a conversation. And we can't generate the conversation without taking risks in what we say. That's how I believe it. Else we will be controversial.
it's true. There's people like me who've been doing the same job for a while and probably needed. Actually, Twitter was a good. Gave me something else.
Yeah,
it gave me something else. I may have maybe left ARVs and done something else if I'd been in for another 5-10 years. But I was in a good place. But it's like, oh, more training now. Okay, you know. And so Twitter was really good. I knew it wasn't the next morning I would get a DM from a BBC Spotlight reporter asking me if I wished to comment. You know, and
never going to happen. Brilliant. I mean,
no. But the problem I think with fear for the future in policing is because people used to say one thing. They used to say, I wouldn't bet my pension on that because the pension was pretty good. And it was a really good stabilizer to say, I won't bet my pension on that one. I'm not going to risk my pension on that. The less the wages come in, and more, I think more and more people will join the police for 5 to 10 years and leave. So you're going to get less people who want to go there and think, right, I want to, you know, maybe I've got it wrong here, but they're there to get out of the police, to forward them to the next move or whatever and do that. They're not there for the longevity to think, right, what else can I do in the community to help the police and the public join, so that there's less sort of grey areas between, and that's why I did Twitter, is to take the mystique away from it.
Yeah.
I found there's a lot of people who just want to come to work now. There's no bars, there's no canteens. I'm going to come to work. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to work my backs off, and then I'm going to off home. And sod the world, because all I get when I watch the TV is how rubbish we are, how racist we are, how this and the other. The bosses are telling us to work harder. The MPs are saying, we've got to work more for less money and all this sort of thing. And you could sort of see why it's turned out like that. I'm slightly scared for the future. And then, of course, the police service as a whole is getting younger and younger.
Well, the United States Air Force had a general, a 4-star, and he said, maybe taken a bit out of context because he's a lovely guy apparently, but he said to the fighter community, he said, if you leave, someone will replace you. And they did. They left. It just showed how, you know, and now he had a crisis. And I remember there was a US Marine Corps general, I can't remember who it was now, or it might do actually. I think he was the one before the one that's now. And he said, we will do less with more. So we'll do more.
That was Theresa May. That was Theresa May.
Yeah.
Theresa May said that, of course, in the conference, in the Federation conference. And I remember I could see the frustration in the cops because we knew we were struggling now.
Yeah, my sister said that. Yeah.
We were struggling now. And crime, CID, they've had it bad.
What was the idea about that?
I mean, because
with her cutting force numbers like that, was there something supposed to?
Well, no, she was saying, I did VIP. So I actually looked after her for one on occasion. Yeah. She actually said, it wasn't to me personally, but I overheard. She said, "Oh, why are they getting rid of the front line? They need to get rid of the back office." But the trouble is, once you've sold your family silver, I know in my force, they really resisted trying to sell the police stations. Some of them in quite nice place, and you know, they get a bit of money for it and all that. So then they more centralized, regionalized, centralized, whatever. And then it was like, well, we'll close that because we closed those and all that sort of thing. And he did everything they could before having to stop recruiting officers because they knew that was the thing. We got rid of a few thousand, and boy, did we know. Did we know? We had no. I would say, I would hear, we've got 5 outstanding. You know, I tell you now, and this will be. I can say this. I don't know what it's like now. But about a year, 2 years ago, I'd be getting told as an armed response officer going to a serious injury or whatever, and I'd be told there is a ambulance have told us there's a waiting list of 3999 calls that they can't attend at the moment.
It's serious.
And seriously. And the police were very similar. Christ. Not quite as bad. Yeah. Now, it's not quite as bad now because they've given the 7% of what they took away. I think it was they gave us 100 million or something. It was a lot of money, but it's 7% of what they took away. But these things are, and I think people have, I mean that if people knew, I was with an elderly lady with a seatbelt injury to her chest in her early 80s, and how many times did I then have to take her into my police car at risk to major criticism because I was told, no, there's no ambulance coming for you at the moment, and we don't know when the next one will be. And I'd already waited an hour and a half.
You drive yourself?
How many times was the job?
You drove yourself?
Sorry?
You drove yourself?
Yeah, I three overdoses, drug addicts in the back of my car because there was no ambulances. And the ambulances were working their backside off. Yeah. Absolutely working. We'd see them at casualty, working their backsides off. And of course, because all the money was taken away from frontline services, I instituted mental health services. What would I do? I'd open 9 to 5. Of course I would, because I got my staff. I got my stuff there. The police will look after the rest. The paramedics will look after the others. Not my problem.
Well, in all fairness, the defunding of the police, as a BLM movement in America, was to have these extra services so that police officers, this is the American side, so police officers didn't have to deal with all the mental health and everything else they were dealing with. But of course, defund the police and everything, that messaging isn't clarified. So I can see what they were looking at doing within the.
But what you could say,
not in the UK.
But in a way, that's exactly, it's the safeguarding is pretty much like that. You stop the vicious circle, and how can we do it? And you get all the agencies together, and they say, well, we can get them a house here, because they're being, hate crime from one side of the estate, and they're vulnerable, disabled people, and they're getting like, look, we can stop them. We'll move them to another place that, and they get a bit of psychiatric help and whatever, and you get rid of that vicious circle.
That's exactly it. Trying to break out of that, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. But the trouble with that theory, first of all, it's happening now. We are so much. How do we stop? All my forms I fill in is the least of it is how do we arrest you? How do we deal with the crime? Everything else comes to front. Have we tried this? Have we tried that? Social service, right? How many times social service? What happened then? When is your next one with social services? That goes in every single time, 100% of the time, goes into the system, very quick system that then gets looked at by the safeguarding team. So they go, right, this is 5 times now. We've got a problem here. We need to deal with this. All right, so that's happening now. Secondly, you can talk as nice as you like to an angry person who's just angry, and you can't guarantee they won't commit crime. And you can talk as nice as you like to someone who's a paranoid schizophrenic, whose mental illness means they are completely, you don't know what they're the ones still going to end up on top of the bridge. Who are you going to send to that? Who are you going to send to the violent domestic? We're not being funny. You could take them to as many counselling sessions as you like. It's going to do so much good. But most of this is out of. So who are you going to send to the? So what more social workers? Okay, so you replace police with social workers.
How that works out.
And you're going to give them a police car as well. But the trouble with that social worker, they can't deal with a road traffic collision on the road because they only deal with social working. So the good thing about police, we're jack of all trades. We go to a murder. I then will go to a road traffic collision. I'll go to someone squabbling the street. I'll go to someone who's unconscious in the street. So our time is pretty much full in between the gaps. But
there's something to be said though, because when I was in the military, the work, it's a 12-hour day. Well, sometimes 14 hours, but the boss would try and get you off the squadron because if you're longer than 14 hours, then you can't fly the next day, and he doesn't want that, does he? So they want to maximise what they've got. And of course, we were running on this squadron here, the T2. I managed to get the squadron shut down about 2014 because all my instructors were being used to train the students, and my instructors were supposed to train other instructors. You see what I mean? Because an instructor, 9 months, it takes 9 months to train an instructor who's just come back off the GR4 or the Typhoon, whatever it is. So eventually I got some psychologists up there. They did a report on the squadron and they shut us down. And that was the right thing to do. But it's a difficult one, really. I think there's something I felt, when you're working at that level and you're working that hard, there's something about that. There's a camaraderie, isn't there? There's a team ethic. Police officers, what is it? We kind of excel in adversity, in effect. It's exactly what war is for young men. It's like soldiering on. It is soldiering on. So in a way, we like those kind of challenges. But I know from my sister how many police officers are leaving now, or not, not joining or not staying, and all this kind of stuff. So something has to be done, really, doesn't it? Else, well, it always goes.
I mean, look, all I say to people listening here, it doesn't matter what everyone else is like. Say you're the best at your job, at what you do, and then occasionally someone walks into your office and gives you a slap round the face and a black eye, and nothing happens about it. And then someone else comes into your office and says, you're just corrupt, you're this, that, and you're just this, that, and the other. And they're literally an inch from your face. And then in your office, they'll say, I know you thought you were going home at 5 o'clock, but you're working till 10 o'clock now because you've just arrested someone, and that file is, and the interview's going to take that long. So, but that's fine. That's fine. But whilst that's happening, you then go home and you listen to the television saying how crap you are at your job. You know, you can see why people get slightly disillusioned.
Yeah, exactly. You would have thought, wouldn't you? I wonder, though, you see some of these people, you see some people like screaming in the faces of officers, and you think they're probably mentally ill. I mean, literally, that's not normal behavior, is it? Unless they've spun themselves up, because you can do that in groups, can't you? The madness of crowd.
Yeah.
Like that book.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned him.
Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray. Yeah.
I'm halfway through it. I'm halfway through it, actually.
Sense, yeah.
I've got to confess, I listened to him on YouTube. What a sensible balance. Yes, that's exactly. Thank God there's people like this. And then I bought the book, and the first chapter, I had to Google a lot of the words.
Right, okay.
And then after the first chapter, wow, I was right. That's great. Yeah,
get a bit of an education first, so you're up on this level.
Yeah, you're probably all right. You're an RAF pilot, but you're probably all right. I had to Google a few words and read sentences a few times, and then had to give up on a couple of sentences. Yeah. But then, it was free flight. Yeah, it's a massive bestseller.
Well, Christopher Hitchens and people like that. I used to think I listened to Christopher Hitchens and understand about 20% of what he said. And I go, I think that still makes me more intelligent if I could just take in 20%.
Yeah.
If I could just take in 20%.
I've fallen out with him a couple of times on Twitter because of his collision investigation stuff. You know, he's another where he's a little bit more like us. I don't dislike these people too. I quite like Clarkson because he's another person who just says it as it is. We need people like that. But yeah, no, he thought it was like, no, just sweep it all up, chuck it in the back of the van, and just get people moving again. Which that's what people think. But
he says it for effect. He has to say it for effect. He knows he doesn't. If you were sat next to him, you'd be like, no, I understand completely. But he's like Kate Hopkins. It's his life. His life is this. He's got to be on the front page of a newspaper for saying something so outrageous. I mean, Clarkson is Clarkson, isn't he? That's why we love him, because he's actually a 14-year-old schoolboy trapped in a men's body. Yeah. We know that. I think they said that today on. I think they said that on. What do they say about? The producer of Top Gear said, "Yeah, I write it for 14-year-old schoolboys. That's the level they aim at." Knowing the rest of us love it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, I was just reading some of the comments there, Tim, and it's paramedics there who say, "Yeah, it rings true on this." And I mean, I think frontline services have been silent majority for a long time, because they have been scared. It's one mistake and you're out, and that's the problem. So I think that's why I've got an opportunity. I suppose I've been doing it like you. I've been doing it enough to sort of know what I'm doing, what I'm saying, and that's quite useful, really. So it's quite nice to bang it.
That's why you're valuable to these communities, you see, because people can literally reach out to you. I mean, it's literally ask you a question, and you're not biased anyway. I mean, you're going to give an honest answer because you've seen it for 30 years.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I know, and generally, I know we're good people. And sometimes you have to remind yourself that. And sometimes I have to remind cops that.
Yeah.
You're actually a good person.
A good person, yeah.
Just and that's when I say, okay, get in the bunker for a bit, and just look after yourself and your colleagues and forget the rest for now. Let the rest sort themselves out eventually.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So I always say, people always ask me where we can be found. Where can you be found? Twitter.
All right.
Well,
me?
Yeah, I can't put up your Twitter thing, can I? But
yeah, no, that's fine. Oh, sorry, Twitter. Yes.
If someone wants to find you, so
I should be much better at
where's
this.
your book?
I should be better at this. Remember, kids, by that. Twitter. So I'm X, as in basically I'm X ARV Sergeant. So EX lower score, ARV lower score, SGT.
I'm looking at.
And if you look up Harry Tangye again, Harry Tangye, I've got a weird surname, Tangye. That will find it on Google as well. But no.
And you had to change it, didn't you? Apparently, why did you change it? Because you left the force.
Yeah, well, I left the force, and it used to be DC, ARV SGT. It's a catchy title, but I didn't think it was going to get so big, sort of thing. So the DC was Devon and Cornwall, ARV SGT, and I also thought, well, I don't want to have things associated with what I'm saying to immediately link back to the Force. So I had to get rid of that, and I knew, but when I pressed think, I knew it got rid of my blue tick as well. So
that comes back, doesn't it?
They've stopped. Well, they have very few they give back, but at the moment they're reassessing how they do it all. So I mean, it's useful to have. It does open. It means whilst I was in the job, I was able to speak to MPs, you know, and things like that, which is really useful to do. So you can get straight to the front of it, really. Which is, I said, the thing with Twitter, it allowed me to have a little influence on those who have a lot. So that is
very true. Yeah. But of course, you know, what you say is important as well. And if people see that you've got all these followers and that you're just talking sense, which you do, you're going to be listened to anyway.
Sometimes.
Well, yeah, I'll let you know you're not talking sense anymore. You know, I'm sure you're not talking sense now. They'll be like, Harry, right.
When it gets too heavy, I just took a picture of my dog on there, and that's it. Exactly. That's fine. Everything's good again.
Well, look, really great to have you on here. Obviously, your book on Amazon, is it? I guess.
Yeah, books on Amazon. It's only on Amazon, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So, but
you can go there. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. And I will get you one I will get you to sign one for my younger sister. I think she quite liked that. So I'll I'll talk to you later about that. But look, what I'm going to say now is thank you to all the people that have come into the chat. About 90 people watch this live, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? I do believe you know more about this than me, Harry. It's the first time I've been using this software. That when I hang up this thing or end the broadcast, it stays in the YouTube video, does it? It stays up there?
Depends. Yes, it depends what you link. If you've linked it at the beginning, I'll explain this afterwards if you like. But when you say log off, so to speak, I forget what it means, what it says. You'll do that once, and then it will give you another go. It will say, "Are you really sure?" You'll log off, and then we'll stay here, and we can have a chat then if you like. But we'll be offline. So
if I end broadcast now, this is very nice.
Yeah, so you'll have two choices. If you've linked it to your YouTube channel already, and you can link it to 3, then it will should automatically go there if it's verified, which it will be. It should automatically go there. You do have another option where you can then go for past streams that you've done and download the audio version, and you can download the MP4 version.
Put this one as a podcast.
So you've got it safe. You don't need to save it.
Well, that's great. See, FJP is not just about intelligent conversation or online videos. It's also about how to set up live streams. So what absolute knowledge people are getting from us today is amazing. Right. Well, thank you for being in the chat, guys. And thanks so much, Harry. I'll hang up now and we'll do a quick 2 minutes, okay?
Yeah, lovely. Okay, mate.